comenzar la sesión, me gustaría resaltar algunas de las opciones de accesibilidad y explicar cómo acceder a los servicios de interpretación en Zoom y usar las funciones de accesibilidad en la plataforma WebEx. First, we will highlight on how to use a Zoom platform. Below is a visual example of how to participate and engage in a summit session directly from the Zoom client. Users can click on the unmute button to speak and on the start video to turn on their camera. You can also see the rest of the participants by clicking on participants, and if you want to start a chat, then click chat. This will open up a chat box where you can start messaging the participants. Primero veremos cómo usar la plataforma Zoom. Abajo es un ejemplo visual de cómo participar e involucrarse en la sesión de la cumbre directamente desde el cliente de Zoom. Los usuarios pueden hacer clic en el botón de silenciar para hablar y en el video de inicio para prender su cámara. Pueden ver el resto de los participantes haciendo clic en los participantes y si desean iniciar un chat, haga clic en chat. Esto abrirá un cuadro de chat donde puede comenzar a enviar mensajes a los participantes. Next, we will highlight on how to turn on closed captioning. We have enabled captioning services for each session. When entering the session, you will see a notification that captioning services are available. Attendees can click the CC icon and choose to show subtitles, view full transcript, or modify subtitle settings. A continuación, veremos cómo activar los subtítulos. Hemos habilitado los servicios de subtítulos para cada sesión. Al ingresar a una sesión, verá una notificación de lo que los servicios de subtítulos están disponibles. Los asistentes pueden hacer clic en el icono de C y elegir mostrar subtítulos, ver la transcripción completa o modificar la configuración de subtítulos. We have also enabled interpretation services for each session. When entering a session, you will see a notification that interpretation services are available. Attendees can click on the globe icon and choose to enable interpretation in available languages, or if preferred, simply turn the feature off. To hear the interpreted language only, click Mute Original Audio. Los asistentes también pueden usar los servicios de interpretación. Hemos habilitado servicios de interpretación para cada sesión. Al ingresar a una sesión, verá una notificación de que los servicios de interpretación están disponibles. Los asistentes pueden hacer clic en el icono del globo y optar para escuchar los idiomas disponibles, o si lo prefieren, simplemente desactiva la función. Para escuchar solo el idioma interpretado, haga clic en silenciar audio original. Attendees will also be able to adjust and utilize accessibility features on the WebEx platform. Click on the bottom left icon with your picture or name and a menu should pop up. If you would like to adjust any accessibility features, click on Accessibility Adjustments. Note that these features are only available through the web browser version of the platform. Los asistentes también podrán utilizar las funciones de accesibilidad en su plataforma WebEx. Haga clic en el icono inferior izquierdo con su imagen o el nombre y aparecerá un menú. Si desea ajustar algunas funciones de accesibilidad, haga clic en Ajustes de accesibilidad. Tenga en cuenta que esas funciones solamente están disponibles en el navegador web de la plataforma. Once accessed, users will be able to adjust their settings in their profile. Some key features you are able to adjust are content adjustments, color adjustments, and orientation adjustments. Una vez accedido, los usuarios podrán ajustar su configuración en su perfil. Algunas opciones clave que pueden ajustar son ajustes de contenido, ajustes de color y ajustes de orientación de la pantalla. If you have any questions about this guide or would like to provide direct feedback to the organizers of this event, email us at summit@chicagofoodpolicy.com. We hope you enjoy the 18th Annual Food Justice Summit. Thank you. Si tiene alguna pregunta sobre esta guía o desea enviar comentarios directos de este evento, envíenos un correo electrónico a summit@chicagofoodpolicy.com. Esperemos que disfrute la 18ª Cumbre Anual de Justicia Alimentaria. Gracias.
Okay, great. So if anyone has any questions about what we went over in the video, feel free to shoot me a private message and I'm happy to help out. But now I'm going to pass it off to our speakers. We have Rachel, JoEllen, Raeghn, and Nataki. And yeah, hope you all enjoy the session and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Sandeetha. As mentioned before, today's panel is about advocates for change in the restaurant industry. For this year's Food Justice Summit, the theme is future-proofing our food system. We often think about food production issues that are most visible, the impact on the environment and the agricultural approach to bringing food to your plate. We seldom discuss the treatment of workers who produce, prepare, and serve the food that comes to our plates, partly because their experiences and exploitation are less visible. The conversation on food systems and food justice often overlooks the treatment of people who bring food to our table, whether it's ours or someone else's table. Today, we're going to discuss labor issues in the restaurant setting. Someone else's table includes restaurants. Many restaurants pride themselves on having organic and locally sourced food. However, they need to discuss how their staff is treated, the staff's salary, and the work environment. Today, our panel of organizers will discuss how they are working for restaurants, workers, and hospitality workers' rights and pushing for change in the industry. And I'd like to give a contact warning right now. This session may include readings and media and discussions around topics such as sexual assault, domestic violence, stalking, physical violence, and identity-based discrimination and harassment. This content may be difficult to hear. We encourage you to take care of yourselves and well-being, and whatever that looks like to you. Feel free to take yourself out the camera and move away from the content. And if need be, privately message one of the facilitators. Also, we're including in the chat mental health resources in Chicago. They will be put in the chat. As I did not mention before, my name is Rachel Mallinga. I'm the facilitator today. And, welcome. And come join me in welcoming our distinguished panel of organizers. First off, Nataki Rhodes, the national lead organizer for One Fair Wage. Raeghn Draper from Chicago Hospitality Accountability Advocacy Database, or referred from this point on as CHAD Project. JoEllen Chernow, the co-founder and co-director of Survivors Know. So join me, virtual clap, applause, and welcoming our panelists. Okay, our first question to Nataki, Raeghn, and JoEllen. Tell us about yourself and your organization. What are you focusing in on your work, and what are you currently working on in your organizations? Nataki.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Nataki Rhodes, and I am a national lead organizer at One Fair Wage. One Fair Wage is a national organization, and we are throughout the country. And we have organizers in our leadership from New York to California, and here in the Midwest, also in Michigan. Right now, our organization has always been, over the last 3 years now, it's been advocating for tip workers, restaurant workers, which to end sub-minimum wage on a federal level and on a state level. And so we've been advocating for workers to get the full minimum wage plus with their tips on top. Definitely here in Chicago, we have our campaign here in Chicago advocating for one fair wage with our state bills.
Thank you for providing that information. Raeghn?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Raeghn. I'm here with the CHAD Project. The CHAD Project was an organization created by hospitality workers for hospitality in Chicago. We're looking to advance accountability and end the toxicity within restaurants. CHAD really believes that by creating an accountable hospitality culture, we can empower pleasurable and sustainable lives for workers. The way we really do this is two parts. We provide educational resources for workers, exposing a lot of the norms within restaurant cultures for their abusive and oppressive nature. And then we provide tools and resources to workers so that they have the language to not only empower themselves and protect themselves in their workplaces, but advocate for their coworkers. Really excited to be here with you all.
JoEllen?
Hi, I'm JoEllen Chernow. I'm a co-founder of Survivors Know. We are an organizing action hub. As survivors of power-based sexual violence, we organize, challenge the status quo, and create alternatives to the systems that fail us. So we couple trauma-informed labor organizing with survivor justice to address our wholeness as survivors. So I come to this space with 20 plus years as a community and labor organizer and as a survivor. So we build out our work, and a lot of that is in coalition and partnership with the CHAD Project and One Fair Wage. We focus first on creating our own systems of solidarity, and that can look like solidarity circles where we really focus on the immediate needs of workers and survivors while placing that within the larger context of system failure. We advance corporate accountability campaigns to expose bad players, toxicity, really with the aim of culture change. And we're focusing a lot here in Chicago around deepening and expanding the communities of solidarity and support among hospitality workers and among survivors.
Thanks for this information. What are your current campaigns with your organizations? Nataki, can we start with you?
Yes, so right now, our current campaign here in Illinois is our state campaign, which is One Fair Wage to end sub-minimum wage. And so right now we do have a sponsor for our bill, which is State Rep Camille Lilly. And we also are working to have our Senate, sponsor in the Senate as well. And so we have Illinois Full and Fair Wage Coalition that we are working with, and Joe is a part of that. Many of you all are part of that work, that incredible work that we've been doing. We're having actions in front of the NRA. We're having actions in front of the Applebee's, because we also have an Applebee's campaign that's going on about the Applebee's is a part of the National Restaurant Association. And so their wages here in Illinois is still below from $7.80 an hour with their tips. And we want wages to be up to $15 an hour with their tips. Talking with Applebee's, having workers and Applebee's workers fill out. Also, just
Nataki, you're cutting in and out.
That the National Restaurant Association Also, a word in that's been coming in that we just released 2 articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post about the national using money from their ServSafe. A lot of people get ServSafe, and we have ServSafe here in Illinois for restaurant workers. It's a food handling certificate, and they've been using that money to lobby against workers. And so we are intersecting all our campaigns, but at the end, our campaigns are led to end sub-minimum wage here in Illinois. And we also have one fair wage recently here coming forth in DC and in Michigan. And so we also have 7 one fair wage states as well. But specifically here in Illinois, the wages started with freely slaves here that worked at the Pullman Porter's Museum. I mean, at the Pullman's Porter is a museum now. But the fight started here with the tip workers and fighting for their tips. And so we continue that work here right now as wages still continue to be low, sexual harassment continue to be low. The pandemic exposed that about workers, women of color, not having the wages they need here in Illinois and throughout the country to take care of their families. So that's where our work is, and we're definitely moving forward to make this the law in Illinois.
Thank you for that. Raeghn, what are the current projects CHAD is working on?
Yeah. So our major campaigns in partnership with Survivors Know and Joe, we have been organizing Alinea workers. At the moment, we've just been collecting stories and experiences and connecting them with resources they need to, again, advocate for themselves and advocate for their colleagues. Along with that, we recently launched our strike fund. So we are raising small dollar donations to be housed as a fund for Chicago workers if they want to go on strike for any reason, not just to unionize, but the reason this fund was created was because workers at Momotaro, one of their colleagues died, and managers were forcing them to work instead of closing for a day like the workers requested. So they left, they walked out of a shift. And then we started collecting funds to compensate them for walking out. And then their employer came back and said that they would pay for the day that they walked out. So we've kept the funds as a general strike fund and are continuing to raise money to be used for any worker in Chicago. And then I had another campaign, but now it left my brain. So
it's okay. You can talk about it at the end also. And
we'll
JoEllen.
those two.
Yeah, it's okay. JoEllen.
Yeah, and again, with the CHAD project, just building off of all that work, we're developing a digital platform for hospitality workers in Chicago. So this will be a space really bringing to the surface the whisper networks. So workers' experiences with wage theft, with sexual harassment, with gender-based violence, with discrimination, as a way to, one, expose and share information and better equip workers. We're really thinking of this as a harm reduction public health tool. And ultimately, we imagine it being as a means of worker to worker communication, really deepening the network of solidarity and mutual aid among workers. And it's a little bit off in the future, but we're hoping, because this industry is so toxic, we're really hoping to be focusing on how do we generate and how do hospitality workers generate their own wealth and move that wealth as well toward the community. So we're exploring a community wealth incubator for hospitality workers. And that's really in its infancy. But as I'm sure, this food justice space, there's a lot of co-ops, there's a lot of experience within that realm. So appreciate, being in this space with all of you.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
thank you for telling us about your current projects your organizations are working on. So this is a question for Nataki and Raeghn. What is the general history of hospitality and how does that impact the restaurant workers today?
Thank you for that question. I kind of hit on it a little bit in my question before. So the history for restaurant workers definitely starts here in Chicago with the Pullman Porters, the sleeping Pullman Porters brothers. And they were freely new slaves that were here in Chicago. And they worked at the Pullman yard, at the Pullman train company. And they were working for no wages and they were just getting tips. And women that were working were getting no wages. And so the history of that labor organizer, which is I call the greatest organizer on earth, is Philip A. Randolph. He organized the Pullman Porter workers to fight to get wages, to start the union, but Black women were left out. Women of color, definitely at that time, Black women were left out. And so when wages did finally get raised, it was like $0 on top of $0. And they were just getting, it's a 213 right now on a federal level. And so that history shows us that we must continue that fight leading on to up until right now, today. This fight still continues for women, Black women, women of color, all of the restaurant industry tip workers have been carrying this wage disparity across America. And so it's all exacerbated through your Denny's, your IHOPs, your TGIF Fridays, even your Capitol Grills that's here. And so this fight that we continue to demand justice, wages, and justice for workers here in Illinois and across the country. And so from that work right there, that history right there, that employs us to continue from that past to now to make this history right. From emancipation, this has been going on. And also that the National Restaurant Association, they have been a part of this legacy of slave wages due to they always have lobbied against workers. And from the Pullman Porters, they fought heavily. They are the one that imposed these laws on the Pullman Porters and made it law, like, oh, here's a bunch of Black people, they can just work for nothing and just get tips. And so they demanded, like, no, this is not the case. And so Chicago has a rich history of labor and fighting for labor and rights of workers. And so that history conforms into the history now. Right now, the National Restaurant Association is the second largest lobbying association in America. And so they have associations in each state, and they have one here, and they use their ServSafe money to lobby against workers, which workers face high sexual harassment, high wage theft still in this day and time. And so we're still in this day of time fighting on a federal level and throughout the states to get the wage disparity, to end wage disparity, period, from the fight that Philip A. Randolph started. And that's the fight that we're in right now, wage justice for workers, tip workers, and restaurant workers.
Thank you. And before we get to Raeghn, so some people might not be familiar with what ServSafe is and who the National Restaurant Association is. Can you just give us a brief explanation, what are these what is the Restaurant Association and what is ServSafe, and why that's important to have this discussion around restaurants to know what these are. I'm sorry, Raeghn, I'll get back to you soon.
Yes, so the national, as I said, the National Restaurant Association is an association that has a history all the way dated back to emancipation. And they are a large association that has grew like the National Rifle Association. And they have put laws from across the country in play to hold back workers from getting wages. And so they have from emancipation all the way up until now, they are very heavy funded, and they fund a lot of legislators. And so right now we're asking legislators now that we know what they're doing with ServSafe. So ServSafe is a food handler certificate. And so the Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association, they have created this ServSafe program for workers at Applebee's, McDonald's, the Chop House, Capital Grill. And so they say, hey, you need this ServSafe to in order to serve food. And so they have here in Illinois actually made it an ordinance, a law, like you need a food handlers, but they have promoted themselves like, hey, come to us, we have ServSafe. And so that ServSafe, that millions of workers have put their hard-earned dollars to get it. They have literally used this money to lobby against us and to hold us back from getting the wages by creating this and saying that this is the money to use to be lobby, and also the campaign money that they donate to legislators, especially here in the state of Illinois. And so that's a very dangerous false concept, is that if would I take ServSafe if I know you are taking that money, lobbying against me to not higher wages, affordable housing. I mean, when you take that, you use that money to lobby against workers, then you take away affordable wages, affordable housing, vacations for workers, better schools that workers can send their kids to. And so this fraud that they have done to workers, we are now pursuing legal ramification against this. And so we're asking all workers that have ServSafe to definitely contact us, because right now we are fighting them against this. And that's why we have several articles come out about ServSafe and the damage it has done across America, definitely here in Chicago, and across Illinois, that the damage it has done from us to be able to raise the wages and end sub-minimum wages.
Okay, thank you. And we'll get back to that subject also, talking about ServSafe and everything. Raeghn, the same question. What is the general history of hospitality? How does that impact restaurants today? And also, like, how does that, what is like the relationship also with the history of white supremacy?
Yeah, just jumping off of the great points that Nataki made, I think also one point about the National Restaurant Association, one of the things that makes it so insidious is that they advertise themselves as an organization that advocates for restaurants and small businesses. So they portray as this big house where it's like, hey, look at us, we care about you guys, we will advocate for y'all in Congress and policies that will make, make it easier to have small businesses and for restaurants to thrive. But that's just all a facade. As Nataki said, they actively lobby against workers' rights. But a bit of the history about hospitality, taking y'all way back, but prior to emancipation, like the early 1800s, restaurants as we know them now did not exist in America, in the United States. The place for hospitality to take place was especially in the South, in plantations or homes where folks owned slaves. And so they used this free labor from stolen Black folks to host hospitality, to host people, to provide meals and welcoming spaces. And so this was the birth of American hospitality. Prior to emancipation, we needed somewhere to put all of these freed Black people, but we wanted to keep the system of, not paying people for their labor. So tipping was a practice that was common in Europe, but in Europe it never replaced a base wage. You were still allowed a base wage, and then you might receive a tip on top of your wage as a sign of gratitude for the service you provided. America took that, as we do with most things, a little bit too far, definitely too far. And when tipping first came about, there was no base wage at all. So Black hospitality workers, who primarily were the folks in the service sector, were not receiving any wage. They would just rely on the generosity of white folks for their wage. And these folks moved into restaurants as they started being creating, to the railroads, they were porters, like Nataki mentioned. And it wasn't until the late 1800s, early 1900s that we're even offered a base wage. But that base wage has not gone up, a sub-minimum tipped wage. So I think what is still impacting restaurants today is that legacy of slavery, that legacy of free or unpaid or exploited labor. Restaurant workers still combat that. I think another legacy from slavery and white supremacy was that not only was the physical labor of enslaved folks taken for granted, but it was also the emotional labor. And that is the same today. Hospitality jobs aren't seen as real professions oftentimes. The emotional labor of folks dealing with the public is not considered, is not taken into account. And that on top of the physical aspect of working service jobs, there is an immense mental and emotional capacity that is demanded of workers, and that often is erased and overlooked. So we continue, like I said, the history of exploited and underpaid labor is a huge theme throughout hospitality's history in America.
Okay, thank you for that. So Nataki, you've covered this very well in what you've given to us so far. But if there's any more to expand on what you said, the next question is, what are the issues restaurant and hospitality workers face in Chicago and beyond? And what tools and resources are there to combat these resources? And you can expand on that, Nataki, if you would like. This is a question for the whole panel.
Repeat that first question again.
Sorry about that. What are the issues restaurants and hospitality workers face in Chicago and beyond? And what tools and resources are there to combat these issues? And I feel like you're talking about that, earlier in the panel, but if you would like to expand on that or add to anything, you're more than welcome, or we can go to the next panel. So do you have anything to add on to what you said earlier?
Oh, no, just the resources is that we have legal resources as far as a lot of to help workers here that are facing wage theft, that are facing discrimination, sexual harassment, that we are here and we do have an office and we do have legal resources that people can reach out to us to.
Is there anything like within the greater movement within One Fair Wage, like national resources that people can access, or just only local?
Oh, no, we have national resources and also we have local resources here in Chicago and nationally as well. So thank you for that. Yes, we do.
Thank you for that information. Raeghn?
Yeah. Some of the issues that face restaurant workers, not just in Chicago, is definitely the lack of social safety nets within hospitality restaurant spaces. So restaurant workers specifically have been left out a lot of the legal protections for workers. They're provided very few benefits, very few days to take off if they're sick or if someone in their family is sick. I would say that's one of the largest issues within restaurants as a whole, is workers are provided very few benefits. As far as resources available, during the pandemic in Chicago, actually, it was mandated that it is mandated that all restaurant workers receive 3 sick days a year. So if you work in Chicago, or if you know a restaurant worker in Chicago and they are not aware, you are city mandated to have 3 sick days. Outside of other resources, definitely the CHAD project is a resource for folks, One Fair Wage. The project that we are working on with Survivors Know to bring an app to fruition is to bring that whisper network that workers often use to protect themselves and to share what's going on in restaurants into the reality, into a more mainstream accessible form. Yeah.
Thank you for that. JoEllen?
Yeah, I mean, adding on to what everyone has shared, I mean, it's been really rich. I think in Chicago specifically, we don't see a lot of Olive Gardens. We're not seeing Denny's in Chicago, but we are seeing large restaurant groups that really do set the culture in the city. And so that's Let Us Entertain You, that's the Boca group, that's the Alinea group. And, they're setting the standards for all workers in the city. And all of these restaurants appear to be standalone, independent, sort of hipster places like Big Star or the Alinea group. I mean, any number of these restaurants. And, things that we're hearing from workers from the Alinea group, I think that are really, really distressing, to say the least, is we had our first Solidarity Circle meeting with workers, and folks who hadn't been within their kitchen in years were still traumatized, were shaking as they were sharing their experiences of sexual harassment, of discrimination, of wage theft. And I think in addition to that, there is a significant amount of food waste at a place like the Alinea group. So, and appropriation of cultures. So workers reported that Palo Santo is steeped in a cream for one of their, I don't know if they still have this on their menu, but for one of their items on the menu, and then they just toss that cream out, this Palo Santo steeped cream. We heard that they get venison, and I don't know, again, if this is still on the menu, but for food justice activists, this would be, they get their venison. I know in the Midwest, we have some deer, I think, right? But they get their venison from Hawaii, of all places. And then from that, cut them into tiny little cubes and then throw out about 70% of that meat. So we're talking, and this is really unchecked toxicity. And so I think workers coming together to expose these conditions, but to also really shape what the industry can look like, because there's no one better equipped to do that than hospitality workers themselves. In terms of resources, we put as one of the resources on here, the zine, the Surviving and Thriving in Service zine that One Fair Wage and CHAD Project and Survivors Know developed, and it's an interactive, you can download it, and that's just a helpful organizing tool. It's self-paced. It also provides a lot of healing justice and journaling pieces, and I think you can hook up with any number of our organizations just by looking up us online. But I also think, you know, a way to show solidarity when you are a customer in a restaurant is, you know, I think it's showing like it's understanding where that server is coming from and where that food is truly coming from. When we talk about farm to table, I think we also have to really include back of the house, front of the house as a part of that experience. And yeah.
Thank you for that. So my next question is.
Can I add one more thing? Just
Oh
one
yeah,
more.
sure, go ahead.
So Raeghn mentioned that there's these 3 days of earned sick time that are mandated now by the city. But what's unfortunate is that workers often cannot take advantage of that. So they're still going to work sick, or they're still going to work with a sick child at home, or whatever the reason, because the employer more often than not is requiring them to find someone to cover their shift. So imagine, I mean, we had someone with RSV, respiratory something, and they were forced to go to work because they couldn't find anyone to cover their shift. And so they had a bartend that night. And so we can have these laws on the books, and we can have, and we can have all of this, but if we're not like consciously like thinking about ways to like reinforce that social safety net that Raeghn talked about, then like the industry is just not going to change.
Yeah, thank you. Because I know for ServSafe, they tell you if you're sick or have like sick, cough, everything, that they ask you not to go to work because you can pass that on to the customer. But then on the flip side, there is pressure from the owner or manager to come into work and, you know, get everybody sick.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's often the responsibility of the employees to educate the employer on these laws. Like, I mean, they sort of act like it's another city or another, another restaurant's problem rather than their own. And it's that, again, is problematic.
Thank you. So, like, have any of your organizations contacted or like confronted like owners, managers of these restaurants, and what kind of response do you get from them?
Nataki, you want to go? Or?
Nataki, sorry. I think she might
Well, for one, I have definitely have talks with Sam Toya here in Chicago when in 2018, and they were at the state, signing the bill. And I said, hey, we're just not on the menu, and you all continue to, lobby against us. And, what's the reason? He's like, oh, we're being pragmatic. And, when you talk to restaurant owners that are from or members of the Illinois Restaurant Association, they always believe in the myth that, oh, if I raise the wages, it's going to close. If I do this, anything that will enhance the worker, myth is to tell their members, from Home Run and Pizza, from Giordano's, from Applebee's, definitely to keep wages low. And so we do have the High Rose restaurants here in Chicago. We do have High Rose Kitchens restaurants that promotes like, no, this is not the way to go. It promotes high turnover rates, low wages. It promotes sexual harassment, low wages. And so this is what your association is promoting. And so they try to hide behind things like save our tips. And they are really advocating to hold wages down. And so we're glad to have High Road members here in Chicago, like Honey Butter Fried Chicken, like Sugar Bliss, like City Whiskey and Barbecue and Ribs on 22nd Street, to want to promote higher wages and better working environment for their workers. And so these are the people that chooses not to be a part of the Illinois Restaurant Association. And also we have Monique from Car 47. She definitely chooses not to be a part of the Restaurant Association. So we are growing our high road members, and definitely, you know, the more that the pandemic exposed right now, people are raising their wages because they can't find workers, and workers are still walking now, and they still like, well, what is going on? It's the wages, it's the expansion of life, like to have these things. And so now owners are forced to give paid sick days, are forced to higher wages, are, you know, forced to not let you be the enforcer of the mask. And, you know, workers have been put your mask down, how do you look? Just all of this emotional stress that workers go through, just trying to make $10 or $7, and on the federal level, right next door in Indiana, $213, it's just too much. And you're still, Chicago faces high evictions from workers that work every day. Workers are going homeless just because they need their wages raised. So if you raise wages right now for non-tip workers here in Chicago and in the state of Illinois, why can't the sub minimum wage be ended and be at $15 an hour plus with tips on top?
Thank you for including that. JoEllen, Raeghn, would you like to add anything?
I missed the question. Can you repeat it,
Like the
please?
follow-up question is like, what happens when you confront restaurant owners or the restaurant groups and call them out or bring attention to their mistreatment or abuse and exploitation of their workers?
They don't like it. That's it. Lots of gaslighting, lots of, well, this is the way it always is. Well, you don't understand. Yeah. But personally, I don't care about owners. I just care about the workers.
And
Okay.
then one thing about it is that I love to be like, hey, you know, this is a legacy of slavery. So who wants to be affiliated with that? And so they try to even disperse that myth, you know, but these are facts. And from the mostly like even the small mom and pop business, they're still in business they have to raise their wages. And so when you talk to people that are a part of not wanting to raise their wage, they are mostly at times with high turnover rates.
Thank you for adding that. So,
Can I just add one thing about, so we, last year we were organizing with workers from Topgolf. Topgolf is a national sports entertainment chain. So think of like the worst parts of what we're talking about in the hospitality industry, and then like add golf. So like sort of white boy impunity and frat boy culture. Hope I'm not offending anyone on this call with that, but you know, workers had reached out to us from Las Vegas because they'd been engaged in litigation against Topgolf for extreme sexual violence and had been engaged for a couple years in litigation, but really wanted to change the conditions. And so workers from around the country were experiencing the same things that they were in Vegas. And so we confronted them. We developed, with One Fair Wage, put together a really exhaustive report with survivors' experiences in their own words, and the retaliation that they endured after reporting incidents. And we this Valentine's coming up, so it's sort of the anniversary. We had 13,000 signed petition. We had Valentines that were sent to Topgolf headquarters. We had an action where we had a billboard driving around Topgolf at their headquarters. And we didn't get a response, you know? So I say that there's a lot of beauty that came out of that, and those workers coming together and creating and deepening that community of support. But I'll say that it takes a lot to shift this culture. And I mean, it just takes, again, like from every component of the food justice space. So
Thank you for that. So this is going to be one of our final questions before we open the floor to questions from the audience. So the theme of the conference of the Food Justice Summit this year is future-proofing our food system. As organizers and activists for hospitality and restaurant workers' rights, how do you understand this theme? How do restaurant workers' rights fit into future-proofing our food system? So, Nataki.
So definitely, I think being able to afford, afford, everything is about afford. What can you afford? And so farm to table, we work with farm to table. That's very important. And so affordability is very important to be workers to be able to afford, and to how can we afford anything without having a livable wages. And so how can we support ourselves as a community, as ourselves, as our family going into the future, and having dignity about this is a career. I myself, I forgot to mention that, yes, I am a current, used to be a tip worker before I became a national organizer. So I did work for $4.95 an hour across Chicago until they raised the wage to like $5.95 an hour. And so like how from that point of me trying to realize like I did raise my son and family and try to do the best you can, but also the emotional part of facing eviction, no vacations, this, that, who wants a future like that? And so with being able to have a sub-minimum wage ended in sub-minimum wage for a career that we are service workers that want to be in this industry. I wanted to be a server. I wanted to be a bartender. I wanted to be a part of the restaurant industry. I did not want to be a part of the stealing of wages, the sexual harassment, the low wages, the no benefits. I did not sign up for that, but I did myself have a serve safe in service management, a bartender's certificate. So we do go to school for culinary. We do apply ourselves to get educated to be in the positions in the restaurant industry to be able to serve. So it's not like you are teaching me this. No, I'm going to school to learn these skills. So why shouldn't they be fighting for a higher wage, which in no other industry does workers have to fight for a higher wage. And so going into the future for young workers that are working, this work is so important to change the dynamics of the wages and to teach young workers like, hey, this is a great profession to be in, and this profession can take you all over the world, but we must change the wages in this profession so it can meet the criteria that the workers and that they have put in to be an excellent host, to be an excellent server. And so these are the things that will help us and all of us together, working together as we are to fight for justice and better workers' rights and better workers' conditions going into the future is definitely important for the youth and the young women and men that are a part of all this the restaurant industry.
Thank you very much for that. Raeghn and JoEllen, do you have any thoughts on about future proofing our food system, and how does that relate, or how does restaurant workers' rights fit into future proofing our food system?
Yeah. I think the reason we're even here and we're even dreaming of future proofing a food system is because, you know, all of our systems are at risk. We're facing climate change, we're facing a widening class gap. You know, poor and working class folks are being attacked at all sides from every issue. So this future proofing needs to happen in order to protect ourselves and our planet, not just for those who are alive right now, but also, like Nataki said, you know, the youth and those who will come. Workers' rights fit into that future proofing system because so many of us are workers. I think hospitality is a wonderful industry because it really builds community. I don't want restaurants to go anywhere. I don't want hospitality to go anywhere. It's really beautiful when you share space and share food with people. And so when we advocate for those people and we protect those people, we're protecting our community and we're protecting a system that feeds us all and can benefit us all. So I'm very hopeful for, you know, all of these, for our work to build a future that really advocates for workers.
And JoEllen, would you like to add anything for that question?
I think both Nataki and Raeghn said it. The only thing I'd add is for within your space and within to the folks listening, like to seek out opportunities to build out intersectionality within two workers and to build out solidarity among among our movements.
Okay, thank you very much for everything. And we're opening the floor to questions. And I have one question I've seen from Adonis from Grow Greater Englewood. Let me try to read. Who works in it? They do have questions organized. The questions about organizing and other tapping into this movement. And their friend responded, are these active organizations that are assisting industry workers? And also, what are we doing to combat lobbying that occurs from ServSafe and other organizations that have made themselves indispensable to our industry? What is the best way to go about organizing without being disbanded? Is there anything else would you like to add on? I think we talked about it within our conversation, but is there anything you would like to add to that response?
I mean, I think the
Go ahead.
last, I think Nataki and Raeghn, we all covered the first parts, but happy to like connect more with this guy. But I'd say like in terms of disbanding or, you know, breaking up organizing efforts, I think, you know, the key around that is preparing for the employer to divide, to use a number of tactics to, you know, start pizza days and to give one worker a raise and the other not. I mean, it's, as you know, Raeghn mentioned, there's a ton of gaslighting and a ton of triangulation and exploitative behaviors that the employer uses. And so I think amongst workers themselves, building their own systems of solidarity and support and understanding of what's ahead of them and connecting with organizations like ours around, you know, how we can support them in their effort, I think, and because we also engage, you know, consumers and other, you know, sort of public advocate organizations.
I would just add to the serve safe point. You do not have to take the serve safe. There are other food handler certificates that you can take. So it is a requirement in Illinois, California, and I forget the other states, but it is a state requirement that you are food handler certified. You do not have to go through the serve safe and give the National Restaurant Association your money. So make sure, just do your research and check out like others organizations that offer certificates. And as far as organizing your space, it all just starts with conversations, and they don't have to be like, hey, let's go after the boss. They can just be really small, just like, hey, we worked 8 hours and we didn't get a break. Did you notice that? That's wild. Like just small check-ins with your coworkers, you'd be surprised like how those conversations grow and how those relationships build. The key to successfully organizing your space is really having strong relationships with your colleagues. So my point of advice there, or to start, is just to start conversations and to generally care about each other and to have one another's backs.
Yeah, thank you for that. Better than, rolling up to your boss's house and, doing something. So I'm not advising anyone to go to anyone's boss's house, and
At least not as a first tactic.
yeah, that's like, third.
And I just want to add on that, yeah, that's Chicago, Illinois definitely has made an ordinance for that. And so you don't have to go through ServSafe. You can go through the city to get your food handlers. You can go through the community colleges. We are right now in the process of being accredited to be able to do food handlers license. So that will be coming very soon through the High Rhodes restaurants that we have. And so that'll be coming. And so I think we have in a link the people that the industry, the food handlers that we're using now. I think it's just safe food or just food safe.
I think it's in the document that.
Okay, great, because I don't want to give out the wrong info. So we're going with them right now, but we're going to be accredited. And yeah, please stop right now getting ServSafe. This is very important at this moment about this. And we have been all over speaking about the importance of not getting ServSafe, because they are literally taking millions of dollars, lobbying on a federal level and throughout the states against workers through the ServSafe food handlers. Okay,
Thank you for that. And we're at 12:52. I think we have enough time to answer one question. This is the final question. So someone's asking, as a new farmer, I'm curious about connection, solidarity work with your organizations across farm workers and hospitality workers, either what's already happening or what's a possibility to be collaborating with farmers or farm workers. Oh, and also there's a poll, SIFPAC poll, which will be launched shortly. So do you want to just say couple thoughts on solidarity with like people who work in the food chain but are farmers or other aspects of that?
I mean, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is like imagining something together. I would like need to know a little bit more about, I think there's certainly opportunities, and not to be like super vague, but I think it would be helpful to just like, I think spaces like this are helpful to start the conversation. And then I think learning more about what you're hoping to build and how and how that could align with what we're building, I think is the good place to start. I'd hate to be like super prescriptive, but that's kind of a non-answer. I don't know, Nataki or
I mean, just reach out to you.
Well, we definitely work. It's intersectional work. When you say farm to table, we're talking about folks that have been exploited by these same entities that we're talking about, by this same racism that we're talking about within the farm workers. So like advocating for higher wages that they have been exploited for, advocating for better working conditions for farm workers. So yes, One Fair Wage has definitely done the numerous of advocation and work with farm workers, because farm workers are your restaurant workers as well, because we're talking about growing our food, bringing it to our table and serving it. And so, you know, that's all connected together. And so it's very important for us to be connected to the farm workers that grow our food and to fight for their rights as far as their wages, the exploitation, the government, the agriculture. I mean, it's so huge here in Hopkins, Illinois, to take, for example, the Black farmers. That used to be one of the biggest industry for farm workers here in Chicago. And because of the de-investment of that, you know, farm workers, these farm workers particularly are not at all your farmers market and everything. So we have to promote them as well as to bringing their food to our tables and to bringing their wages and their living conditions up as workers as well.
Thank you for, yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for, you know, adding that. And everyone, you know, thank you very much for Raeghn, JoEllen, Nataki for coming today. And if there's a document that was added to the chat that has more information about these great organizations, their current work, any way you can support them. And if you would like to, like to collaborate with them or want to learn about other ways you can support them, you know, their contact information should be there. So, you know, thank you very much for coming, everyone. And also CIFPAC has put in there's a feedback poll for you to finish about the talk. And I think that's about it. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for all the wonderful educational that you've given to us. And I really highly recommend reaching out to them and hooking up and to learn and help and collaborate and support this movement for restaurant hospitality workers.